Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to the Campus ESP webinar today. If you're just joining now, this is Strategic Parent Engagement Increases Student Enrollment with myself from the Campus ESP team, and I'm joined by our two lovely co-hosts and Campus ESP customers, Mary Beth Marks and Amanda Craddock. And we will get started in just a moment or two. I can see there are still a lot of folks trickling in. So we will just give it another, let's say another 30 seconds or so, and we will jump on in. Thanks for being here today. It's always the longest 30 seconds when you say we're going to wait 30 seconds and then just stare at the screen.
It's not longer than like 30 seconds of burpees. Not even close.
Burpees may be the longest 30 seconds. All right. Well, that felt like a long 30 seconds. Let's jump on in. So, just starting with a couple logistics to set the scene. This should be nothing new, but I'd like to just call out that your lines are on mute, but we do encourage active participation. No question too big or too small, but please use the chat to chime in with questions or comments throughout the webinar. And secondly, we will be sending everything out afterwards. So no need to focus on taking thorough notes throughout the webinar unless you would like to. In terms of agenda, we're going to start with introductions. I'm going to do a very quick 1 minute overview of what Campus CSP is, since I can see there are some non-customers here today. And then we will spend the majority of the time covering the takeaways from our recent student enrollment case study with input from our panelists, Mary Beth and Amanda. They are going to share more about what they're seeing on campus and initiatives that they have deployed to achieve these results. So just starting with some intros, my name is Brooke Sterneck. I am the Vice President of Product Management and Product Marketing at Campus ESP. So that means my team handles all feature requests, all product enhancements, and surfaces the results from our product, including this case study. I've been at Campus ESP for 7.5 years, and I was actually employee number one back in 2017 when we were first getting started. I'll pass it to Mary Beth, who's next on the list.
Yeah. So I have known Brooke for 7.5 years when she was employee number one. That's my interaction with Campus ESP. So I've been using the product for that long at two different institutions in two different roles. And I have worked in West Texas, I've worked in Louisiana, and now I'm here in California as the executive director for strategic enrollment. And I'm not going to say the rest. It does not fit on a business card with my two first names, but that's my title. And what I do here in my role is look for ways to increase student enrollment and engagement throughout the life cycle.
Okay, Amanda?
Sure. Yeah, my name is Amanda Craddock. So thank you all for being here today. Thank you, Campus CSP, for allowing me to participate. I represent Coastal Carolina University. We are in South Carolina. We have, interestingly, the university has been a partner of Campus CSP. I think we were like school number 7. It was our orientation family programs area that first joined. And then almost 3 years ago, the admissions enrollment management group got on board with prospective student families. So I have been at Coastal for 16 years. I have been in higher education 25 years, all on the East Coast. So Virginia and South Carolina have been where I spent my career, and just had an opportunity to meet Mary Beth and Brooke very recently. But we've been happy Campus ESP partners and really excited about the work we've been able to do with our prospective student families.
Yep. Mary Beth and Amanda are two of the best longtime Campus ESP users, and we'll have a lot of insights to share. Good. Thank you both. So just like I said, just quick overview of Campus ESP for those of you who may not be as familiar. A couple of stats I like to start with. So this may be surprising to you, or this may not be surprising to you based off what you're seeing on campus, but 88% of today's prospective parents are expecting communication at least weekly from your institution. And we're seeing over several years of survey data that that expectation is only growing. We also know that parents are the number one influencers of their students. I really love this picture. This is our CEO, Dave Becker's daughter. And these are all of the mailers she received last year when she was a senior in high school. And she didn't read a single one of them. And really, as she was navigating the admissions enrollment process, she was going to her parents for guidance and support. So, Campus ESP is really a one-stop shop to engage families with personalized content, to help nudge their behavior so they can influence student enrollment outcomes, and to provide ROI data so that you can see that your parent engagement efforts are working. We work with over 450 colleges and universities, and we have over 10 million parent users. Now, moving on to the case study that we're going to be talking about today. So, we do an annual student enrollment case study that covers enrollment results from a handful of our customers. We just released this in September, and you'll see that this covers results from 6 different colleges and universities across a variety of institution types. We have publics, privates, a variety of regions, different sizes, including the University of Pacific and Coastal Carolina, who are here with us today representing different institution types. So as we go through the results, we're going to talk about 3 core case study takeaways and go through these one at a time. So the first takeaway is that students with engaged parents are more likely to apply. And when we dig into the data from each of these institutions, on average, we find that if the student has a parent using Campus ESP, their application rate is 51% higher than average. And that may seem extremely high, but when you dig into the data, it makes a little bit more sense. I'm sure many of you find that there are not that many parents even engaged at the inquiry stage. So if you're working with a student who has a parent engaged at that process, at that point in the process, it usually means the family is just super interested already, and the student is almost always going to apply. So just kind of taking a step back and talking about top of the funnel and the role of parents at the top of the funnel, and bringing our panelists into the conversation. The first question is, why is it important to engage families early in the admissions process? And maybe Amanda, we'll start with you with this question.
Sure. So I think there's a few reasons. I think as Brooke said, and the research points out, we know that parents are actively involved, parents and family members in this entire process. From looking at schools, narrowing the list, the campus visit, the communication. We often talk to families more than we talk to students. I think we're all in that situation. But a lot of students, it's hard to collect that family data at point of first interest. And so at Coastal, we always get it on the application, but very few cases. We're trying to get better at this. So we have been able to work through our student search vendor that we're sending communication to family members. In that communication, we're inviting them to join the Campus ESP portal. So there's a postcard that goes out. They get an invitation to go in and create that account. As soon as we have that family member information, whether it's through a campus visit, it's provided in some other way, the family members opted into the portal so we can communicate with them. For example, right now they're applicant families, but we're communicating application deadlines. They don't always know their student applied early action or regular. They wonder when their student's going to hear. So I think it's important that you engage them and they kind of know what's going on, because often they're involved, but their students may not be sharing a lot of information with them.
Yep. Mary Beth, anything to add about how you see parents driving the process at this stage?
I think that if the student has that support from whoever is helping them on their process, so they're moving forward into higher education, that's the person that's driving the bus there. That's the person that's getting them to your campus tours. That's the person that's taking them to your fall open houses. That's the person that's making sure that checklist, that to-do list that you need that student to do is getting it accomplished for you. So it's important to incorporate them in your strategy from day one, which is building that affinity.
Yep. And when we were talking about this a few days ago, I thought this was an insightful point you made, Mary Beth, that parents are often coming to expect this level of communication from the institution because there's such a growth in parent engagement software during the K-12 experience. And maybe that's why we see the rise in parents expecting weekly communication because they've been receiving it since maybe their
Yes,
student was even
we're
in
conditioned.
nursery
We're
school.
conditioned for it. Now we have our portal. We log in there. We see missing assignments. We see grades. We know, we do everything in there. We put lunch money on the lunch account. So it makes sense that I would anticipate and expect that same level during my student search process.
Yep. And Amanda shared a bit about how they are collecting top of the funnel parent data at Coastal. At Pacific, you all, I would say, are ahead of the curve. And compared to a lot of institutions we work with, you have a pretty robust top of the funnel parent data collection strategy. This is one of the top questions we get. Can you share more about how you're collecting your parent data?
Yeah, I can. It's not, I mean, it's a little bit of a trade secret. I'm just kidding. I can tell a little bit. Obviously, you can buy it through search. If you are not purchasing parent data through search, you should be. And you should be doing that when you're building out your when you're nurturing your younger classes to nurture the parents too. They want to be involved. As you mentioned earlier, Dave's kids were looking to their parents for advice. If you have that parent in your pipeline and you're sending them information, you're building that affinity and that knowledge base of your university. So definitely with search, if you are doing digital, any kind of digital advertising, I would include parents in that too, especially at the top when you're doing lead gen. You can ask your partner, if you're doing it in-house, you could do some residential targeting and you can serve everybody in the household.
Yep. It feels like the student search process, of course, has been around for a long time, but the parent search process is a growing opportunity in higher ed for sure.
Yes.
So moving forward, a couple examples of the types of content that Coastal and Pacific are both sending at the top of the funnel. I mean, there's really a variety of topics being covered, but I like to call out these two examples, which you'll see just have incredibly high engagement levels from parents of inquiries so early in the enrollment process. I mean, at Coastal, this reminder to complete application materials has a 24% content click rate, which is just one of the highest click rates you'll see. Even for a parent of an admitted student or a parent of an incoming first year student, we'd consider that an exceptionally high level of engagement. Um, the Pacific side, this nudge to learn about academics on campus has nearly 800 clicks from parents of inquiries. So this is just one slice of the data, but it shows just how involved and engaged and open to information parents may be at this stage in the process. So these are just a couple examples. But question for either of you or for both of you, can you share more about what other types of content you're sending parents at the top of the funnel and what types of results you're seeing from them?
Yeah, we like to start off with like affordability because we are a private university, so we like to address that up front. And you can see that, right under that ad is the 5 steps of financial aid webinar, which we think is very important information to impart early on. Because one thing that we have noticed or we have heard, and we don't have any evidence, but I think when we all take a step back, if we were not involved in higher ed and we didn't understand scholarshiping and discounts and those types of things, we might immediately assume that a private institution is not within our budget or not something that we could afford to send our children to. So it's important for us at the very beginning to address cost and affordability.
I would say for Coastal, we're a public institution, mid-sized, just about 11,000 students. And we don't have a huge office. We don't have a big staff of admissions counselors. We get 24,000 applications each year. So I think where we start doing things more is, number one, we push our campus visits. Our students tell us the reason they come here is our location. And that's been for the last decade. So we're driving campus visits, open houses, we're doing pop-ups and just announcements about those. But then because we primarily have applicant family member data, the prospective student's relatively small, but at the applicant stage, we have them move, they move through a funnel. So it's like application started, application submitted, application pending, application complete. And these kind of messaging will follow at those various stages. And then what we try to do is, if we can, in the fall, every week or every other week, we're sending some sort of announcement, something about the open house, something about when application decisions are released. Next week, we're doing one, a sort of a couple weeks out to hopefully the FAFSA opening up, or a link to our True Cost calculator. We're going to do that as well. And then in the spring, we try to do weekly updates just on things the family members need to know about orientation, housing, financial aid, majors, all those different things. So it's mainly announcements. You can filter, you can custom them, and then just sort of post within the community about visits. And it links into our academic calendar. It links into our campus visit calendar, so they can see things happening on campus as well.
Yep. You both are doing the most, all the types of content for parents, and really, really strong engagement strategy, especially at the top of the funnel. So a lot of good examples there with aid, deadlines, FAFSA, and so on. All right, so moving forward to the next takeaway and moving down in the enrollment funnel, our study showed that students with engaged parents are more likely to enroll. And when we look at the data on an institution by institution basis, on average, the yield rate is 7% higher than average for students with a parent using Campus ESP. So not that we know many institutions struggled with yield last year, and not that yield is going up 7% overall, but there are yield gains happening with students whose parents are most engaged. And when we talk to a lot of institutions and it's a tough enrollment year and thinking about like where you can make gains, we often recommend to focus on the students whose parents are involved in the process. So the data varies institution by institution, as you can see here. But one of the institutions, Coastal Carolina, had one of the highest yield gains for students with engaged parents. And Amanda, I know the data, it's speculative at this point, or we're talking about correlation, not causation. It's really hard to get to causation with yield, but we talked a little bit about some of the initiatives you were doing on campus to, maybe like build better trust with parents and get more from the students with engaged parents. So can you share a little bit more about why you saw those yield gains with students who have engaged parents?
Sure. So, last year, the group that came in fall 24 was the first full year we were fully engaged with Campus ESP on the prospective student side. And we really set up our different, touch points within the funnel as they moved. We had deadline admission for the first time. So we had a lot of changes happening, the FAFSA mess that was happening. And so we started communicating, I would say regularly in early February, once most of all those decisions were released. Tried to do a weekly update. We spent a lot of time on financial aid information, on institutional aid, because we offered all of that early, knowing we couldn't do federal aid. So I think that, and we had pretty good, as you saw, click-through rates and open rates of our communication. Overall, our yield actually decreased 1% for the whole student population. And our freshman class was smaller by about 100 this past year. So I like to think, hey, could it have been bigger if we weren't doing some of these things with our family communication? Did that just help us? I'd like to think so. And then what happens is that we do a lot of messaging and communication throughout the summer with orientation, with housing, class registration, and we partner with our orientation office. And so they were sending communication, we were sending communication. And then right now, their current family members in the portal, and they're getting monthly newsletters and communication from the family programs office. And so, maybe there'll be some retention impact, even though we had a smaller class coming in, if we can retain a few more. So for us, it's like a long-term strategy. They come in maybe as a junior family member in high school, senior family member, that they stay with us until their student graduates. And our orientation and family programs office has done a great job with communication and engagement. We did family weekend information through Campus ESP. So we've kind of done the whole life cycle so that they transition from one office to the other, but the look and feel of what they're getting is the same. It's the same portal. It doesn't look any different. The messaging looks the same. So they feel it's like an easy transition.
Mm-hmm. Well, the question of it may be a smaller class, but are they more likely to retain and graduate? That's a separate study that we
Yeah,
can do next
maybe we
time.
can do that. Yeah, we hope so. I know our family programs office is very excited that we now are together in this and we coordinate communication and different things.
Mhm. Okay, well, I would love to share some examples of the types of content you're sending and get a little bit more tactical on how you are achieving these yield gains with students who have engaged parents. So I have some screenshots from the coastal family experience, the Pacific family experience. On the coastal side, Amanda and her team are using what we call advertisements as well as emails and other content channels to send targeted messages to families based off of the stage of the funnel that they're in. So you can see that this is a reminder, this is going out to admitted families. It's a reminder to deposit. But as the family moves through the funnel, as they do make their deposit, then the message updates and it becomes, orientation and new student checklist reminders. When we were prepping for this webinar, we were also really surprised to see the giant jump in engagement that happens once the parent becomes, once the parent deposits and the money is on the line, you just see a tremendous jump in engagement and buy-in as well. Um, so jumping off that point, like some topics we like to discuss here is um, in what ways are you seeing the parent influence at play, right? We know parents are influential. We talk about that a lot. We know students are relying on their parents, but where are you really seeing that influence play out? And um, Amanda, maybe we can start with you since we have your portal on the screen.
Sure. So I definitely think for the family members, it is, I think probably once the student finishes high school, they start the orientation process, we register them for classes. I think that's when the reality sets in. And then you start thinking, okay, how do I make a payment? What's my financial aid look like? We found checklists to be very important, but also I think Mary Beth alluded to this earlier, it's the family member making sure those things are getting checked off the list. The student, as I said, the student never ever says, how do I pay my bill? That's usually the parent. How do I pay the bill? When is the bill due? And so that's where our checklist is important. That's where pushing messaging out and just making sure the family member, feels like they're a part of the process, not I paid my enrollment deposit to your institution and then you stop communicating with me. They want to be a partner throughout the process. So even, for example, through the orientation process, we were doing some pre-orientation checklists, sending to the student and the family member at the same time, different emails. They weren't the same email. And so different messaging because that family member, again, they probably have the binder, they probably have the calendar that they're marking everything off of, not so much the student. So you can't forget about them. They're a huge part of that process. And that's why we've created some of the things we have on our websites.
Yep. And you started touching on this a bit with the differentiation between parents and students. I think most institutions now are realizing that it is not sufficient to just CC a parent on a student on an email to students, and that the content should be personalized, it should be differentiated. So expanding on that, um, question for you, Mary Beth, how are you differentiating your messaging between parents and students? Maybe a two-part question. How are you differentiating the message? And are you finding that parents and students, care about different topics, or there's things you phrase differently to the two
Yeah.
audiences?
One, the messaging is similar. It's very similar. But I feel like we tailor what we send to our parents more on a parent concern. So parents are more concerned about safety and where my student is going to live versus students might be more concerned about social life or student life or what's campus life like. I think parents are concerned about that too, but it might not be at the top of the funnel of things that they're really wanting to know more about. So sometimes the messaging matches and it mirrors, especially when it's an action item like do this, do that, a deadline coming up. Other times the content will vary because we might be emphasizing campus safety with the parent, but talking about here's things you can do on campus as a student. with their student. And when you talk about CCing a parent, I think that that's a risky move because they are expecting personalized communication. If you CC a parent in Slate right now, and the parent opts out, then you've opted out. They also opt out the student because the way the records are related, and vice versa. So I have seen in my history in roles similar to Amanda's that sometimes the parent wanted the student to go to the school, but the student didn't want to come. So the student would opt out the parent, and then the parent would call and say like, why am I not getting anything? I didn't get anything. And then you'd have to go back to your enrollment technology people and be like, what's going on with this record? And then you find out that the student has opted out, whereas the parent still wanted it, and vice versa. It happens both ways. So I think relying on like the CC or even just emailing a parent, a campaign out of your CRM is risky. The beauty of the parent portal is that it's all right there, and they can select what they want to see. It's the interface that all of us as parents are pretty used to, and we expect these types of things.
And if I can add one other thing, we've gotten smarter. So we didn't have great parent and family communication until probably the last 2 to 3 years, and we were just tying one parent record to a student. The first year we were in Campus ESP, and then halfway through the year we were hearing from family members, well, their mom's getting this, but not their dad, or vice versa. And so we worked and we edited and appended. So I think we can tie up to 3 family member records now to a student. So if there's blended families, separated families, it really works well that they can each get those messaging. So that's something that we learned and refined as we've gone through this.
Yeah, I can remember like emailing my person that helps me out, my technical person on the Campus ESP side at one point, and be like, why are there so many people in the confirmed side when we don't have that many confirmed students? And then they looked, and I mean, that's what's great about you guys is that you always have such a quick response time. It's very personable. But oh, Mary Beth, that's because a lot of your students have more than one parent, or they have 3. And then you're like, oh, that's even better because now there's 3 people that I can tell what needs to get done. And that's a great support circle for that student. That might be a future study, Brooke. Like, the more supporters, even more likely they are to, which is probably true.
We could absolutely look into that. That's a smart point. And I was just speaking with another enrollment leader from another institution who was doing had a really interesting strategy based off of students who have multiple parents using Campus ESP. When it comes time, when you're in yield season and it's about just getting as many deposits as you can to meet the number, their strategy is that they look at the student's engagement score through Slate, and they look at both of the parents' engagement score through Campus ESP, and they put them all together on the parent's record. And then they just look at which of the individuals has the highest engagement score, and that's who their admissions counselor is calling. And in a perfect world, it would be the student, but I think everyone knows that that's the reality. Sometimes the student is just not engaged, and then they look between parent 1 or parent 2 or whoever the supporters are. They say, oh, that's the one who's most engaged. That's the one I'm going to make the phone call to. And it's a really interesting strategy to make sure that the messages are getting heard.
That's a smart move.
We do have a question that just came through the Q&A from Mario that I'm going to read out loud, and feels like this could be a good time to address it. So the question is, assuming Campus CSP has an email marketing platform and you are using it to communicate to parents, does it use it to send emails to the students as well? If not, can you comment from a branding perspective about the pros and cons of having 2 visually different emails? So to summarize, the question's asking, do we email students as well through Campus CSP? And if not, what are the pros and cons of having 2 different emails? So the answer is no, we do not email students through Campus ESP. Most institutions we work with already have very robust student communications going on through their CRM and other vendors they work with. And the problem they're trying to solve is starting their parent communications and giving parents a place to go. So we focus on parents at Campus ESP. While you're right that there are 2 different email experiences, I think something Amanda touched on, which I'll just start with, and I'll pass it pass it to you two to see if you have anything else to add, is that Campus ESP is often the one-stop shop for the parents through the entire cycle, their students' entire higher ed journey. So they join Campus ESP as maybe while their student's a junior or a senior in high school. They use it through the entire admissions enrollment process. And then once they enroll at the institution, like both Coastal and Pacific use Campus ESP for current parent engagement as well. So the parent has a consistent experience where once the handoff happens between enrollment and student affairs, they're still receiving emails that look the same. They're still using the parent portal that looks the same. Rather than registering for visits through the system, they're registering for family weekend or other programming for current families. So um, on the flip side, we often hear that when a parent is getting communication through the CRM and then the handoff happens from enrollment to student affairs, it could be really jarring for them to suddenly go from CRM to SIS or this branding from this department, from that branding from that department. So just the more holistic experience for the family. But I'll see if Amanda or Mary Beth, if you have anything else to add about the two different systems for parents and students.
I mean, I could add that you can see that our portals are branded. So, we've got the header in ours within our emails, within our CRM, we use Slate. They have the same header with our logo. We can do fun ones and different things depending on what the messaging is, but we've made our emails, well, really we did those first. So the portal was designed around Coastal branding, the color scheme, and our emails are very complementary to what the parents are seeing already in this portal. And then you can even see like our picture here on the right side is the campus tour schedule. That's linking to our Slate portal. And so all of our student emails are going out through that system. So they're going into the Slate portal to do those things. So I think there's a common look and feel, even though they're not exactly the same on our side.
Yeah, it's the same for us. It's all intentionally branded. The colors are there, the fonts are there, the pictures are similar. They might be different than what ends up in the email, but definitely the header is very similar to the header that you have on your portal. But to just piggyback off of what Brooke said, I do think that I prefer as a parent this one-stop shop experience with the calendar of events, with the calls to action on the left-hand side, and then the other things there in the middle, depending on what you're promoting at this time during your enrollment funnel, I think is very, very helpful. So you can go in there and you can see everything versus my email would be very one-dimensional with, maybe a button to click to register for a tour, click to register for fall open house.
Yep. Well, great question, Mario, and appreciate the questions in the chat. So we certainly baked in time in the webinar to stop and address some Q&A. So if anyone else is holding on and to any questions, please feel free to chime in. And so moving on to some examples of how institutions are supporting yield efforts in Campus ESP. At the University of Pacific, Mary Beth implemented one of our newest features. We just released it in the spring of 2024. It's called the admissions dashboard. It can be used to really surface a variety of CRM data for parents to help nudge the nudgers, as we call it. So Mary Beth is pulling in applicant checklists, new student checklists. We work with institutions that surface scholarship data as well. And it's basically building a student checklist for parents on the site that they're already going to. We also email parents anytime that the data changes so they can continue to get real-time updates and step in and help out when it's needed. And even though this has only been live for a couple of months, in the spring, we saw that over 500 parents visited the dashboard, but there were over 2,700 clicks, which the data tells us is that on average, a parent was visiting over 5 times to just kind of come back and monitor the student's process. And I think this feeds into the narrative that you both were sharing, that it is often the parent monitoring the checklist and driving completion of the checklist. So Mary Beth is really like the second customer to launch this feature, and the early results are still coming in. But Mary Beth, I wanted to ask um, how did this help you this year and support your enrollment results?
Well, for us, a lot of it became less of an internal lift. So we are always chasing down final transcripts, as you can see in this example here from students once they're admitted. We still need that final one with the graduation date for several reasons, as you all know. So it helps internally that the parent is also getting this checklist, and it's you're sending out that notification that it has been updated or hasn't been updated, and that helps us get those materials that we need to close out our enrollment cycle in the enrollment year, because we could be chasing those down. We probably still are chasing some of those down right now, and that can be a burden on your office. I also, this example doesn't show it, but we also this year pushed over a FAFSA indicator. So the parent would know if we had received the ICER and have loaded it into the system. I think that was really important this year for them to know where they were in that process. There was some anxiety with parents. I think that might have been some of the most engagement that I got with back and forth messaging on Campus ESP platform, on whether or not we've gotten their financial aid and they didn't know if they should deposit. Would the deposit could there be a waiver or an extension of the deadline? And I think having that information there at their fingertips really helped them feel more empowered. They didn't have to call the office. I think a lot of them, Amanda talked about earlier, when students are doing all this stuff in the spring, getting ready for high school graduation and all, it really is the parent with the binder. So you have to think about, what kind of access does a student have during the school day to check these things out? Whereas, us parents might be in an office or somewhere where we can look and say, and do these types of follow-up things while our student is doing their student stuff at the end of the semester.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And to confirm, you kind of just surfaced the same checklist students are seeing in Slate, but you
We
created
did.
a matching checklist for parents in Campus ESP.
Yes, it's very similar. It's not as in-depth as the student checklist once they've confirmed, because we have them do placement testing and those types of things. But I'm sure, as a lot of people can relate, that information lives in different systems that don't all talk in real time to each other. So it's better not to bring that information in, because there would be a lag, too much of a lag for me to feel comfortable pushing that information outwards on the completion thing. But I think in terms of sending in a transcript or sending in the final transcript, it was very, very helpful.
Yep. And you both have touched on this a little bit, but I think it's always helpful to ask. And even the question we got in the Q&A kind of touches on this as well. But um, how do you use Campus ESP in addition to your CRM? You're both Slate campuses, right? Or why do you need a system like Campus ESP in addition to Slate?
For us, one of the I think bonus things about Campus ESP is the orientation hub. We do work with Student Life to help push out their information, but that's an important next steps. And parents definitely have to be involved in that for it to get done, because we have several things beyond like taking a placement exam. You have to do a placement exam and, read this, then do this, then do this. And then here's how you meet with your advisor. And what we found, the few times that I was going out on the road and going to admitted student receptions or confirmed student receptions, yield receptions, we call them, was that parents were more likely to ask me the questions than a student was. Or and I think, Amanda, you talked about this too. A parent could come up to you, and has come up to both of us at some point and said, my student so-and-so doesn't want to ask you this, so I'm going to ask you, what do they have to do next to get registered for classes? If they're asking that question, one parent at one event, there's probably at least 20 parents somewhere else wondering the same thing, or they have no idea what's going on right now, and they're hoping that they're asking their student for more information, and their student, for whatever reason, the messaging is not resonating with them right now, and they're not really quite sure what they need to do. So using the parent portal to send that information out to parents is very valuable, I think, because here's where you're gonna not just yield, but you want to make sure you're not melting as well.
And I think Mary Beth alluded to this, that, post enrollment, there's lots of systems that a campus has.
Mhm.
And so, here at Coastal, post enrollment, the student moves out of Slate really into the student portal that we have, My CCU. And there's not a family member login to My CCU. We can create like a parent facing page, but it's just general information. It's like what's in Campus ESP. So we have found that by communicating with the family members, like we said, through this one portal about all the application things they need to do. Then like during COVID, we used Campus ESP to communicate with family members because we had virtual orientation. We had like these Teal Tuesday family talks that we would advertise and push out through the Campus ESP communication. And we're still doing that now for some of the current family member things. But it didn't move family that, they didn't have to change their login. They didn't have to create new credentials. There wasn't something that an at coastal.edu went with. So it just made it seamless. But then because of how we've set up our data going in, you can filter on different cohorts and when they start, where they are they deposited, are they enrolled? You could do a registration flag, you can do a FAFSA flag, so you can do all these various things and then be able to funnel that data down to communicate the right message to the right family member through that one portal, where Slate may not be solely up to date because something's feeding into our SIS and it's not updating Slate until overnight. But some of the things we're doing in this way do make it easier. So that's just, I think, the beauty that we have. And like family members don't have a login to Slate. They don't have a way to check their student's application portal unless the student shares their login with them. But we're not using this piece of Campus ESP. I think there's some value to it. But I think it just makes the communication piece easier for everybody.
Yep. Okay, really, yeah, those are really great answers all around, and a lot of insight into how the systems both work together, but at the same time serve slightly different purposes. Okay, I'm going to keep rolling to the final section, the third takeaway, which is how Campus CSP can be used for enrollment modeling. So the third takeaway is predict which students are most likely to enroll with Campus CSP's parent promoter score. And here I'm going to need to provide just a little bit more context, especially for the new folks, and then we will jump into how Mary Beth and Amanda are both using this data. So what we find is that if the parent is in the top quartile of engagement, the student is 3 times more likely to enroll. And this 3x number has been consistent for 3 years in a row of case studies looking at nearly 20 different institutions. So there is something there when you step back and look at 3 years worth of data. And if you're wondering how do we measure top quartile of engagement, what does that mean? In Campus CSP, we have something called Parent Promoter Score that measures the parent's level of engagement. And Parent Promoter Score really looks at every action that a parent can take. It looks at whether they're logging into the portal, opening emails, clicking emails, reading content, filling out surveys, registering their account, and they are given a score between 0 to 100. If the parent is in the top quartile, the percentile 75% and up, that's when we're finding that the student is most engaged. I mean, the student is most likely to enroll. So that may not be that surprising, right? The more engaged the parent, the more likely to enroll the student becomes. But since the data gets brought into a score, we're working with institutions that are exporting that score back into the CRM and using it for a variety of strategic purposes when it comes to creating communication and messaging strategies based off the parent score or doing enrollment modeling based off of the score. And here I would love Mary Beth to share a little bit more detail about what she's doing at Pacific, because Pacific has, I would say, been kind of been like a leading customer when it comes to enrollment modeling and or just more broadly pulling in parent promoter score.
Right, right. So we have used it in the past as part of our algorithm to determine likeliness to deposit. We have a new Slate captain now, so we have not implemented that again. But the value, I think, in the parent promoter score is exactly what you just said, Brooke. It's finding those highly engaged parents or even your middle of the fence parents who haven't done something yet that you really need them to do, like apply or deposit. I think those are two really important things. when you're going through the funnel there. So when you pull out those either middle of the fence and or highly engaged sub groups of parents, you can give those to your admission counselors to really focus their efforts on who they need to do outreach to. I think, and Amanda talked about this earlier too, was calling the parent who's really involved in it more than the student. I think there's value there. I've used this parent promoter score in conjunction with other engagement scores that I have from partners who do our yield piece, and I'm able to put them together on Excel. So do a join on Excel and then pass them over to admission counselors and say, here's who really is like wants to take the next step. I think they're engaging the student side, they're engaging with emails. On the parent side, the parent is in the portal, they're looking at things, they're logging in, they're a converted file. I really think this is the group you need to focus on. And in some instances, you can pull that back a little further and say, this group is also really focused. It looks like they're very active around financial aid information. So perhaps you might want to tailor your script to say, hey, I noticed that you haven't taken the next steps. Do we need to go over your financial aid package? Do we need to look at, different ways that you can afford specific? How can I help you take that next step?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you shared the example of combining like a student score with a parent score, and going back to the conversation we were having earlier on in the webinar about, sometimes maybe the student unsubscribes to the parent or the parent unsubscribes to the student. The bottom line is that in a lot of examples, the parent and the student are not on the same page about which institution is the best. And it could go either way, right? Like maybe the student really wants to go somewhere, but it's just not really like financially feasible. Or maybe the parent really wants the student to go somewhere and the student's like, no way, I'm not going to that school. And sometimes the engagement levels are aligned positively or negatively, but when they're not aligned, there's really an opportunity to dig in more. And we hear stories anecdotally all the time where there's a student who has never engaged with the institution. They've never opened an email. They've never responded to counselor outreach. And for all intents and purposes, it looks like they're not at all interested. But then the parent has a super high promoter score. A counselor calls the parent and they have an amazing conversation. And the student was interested all along. The student was just being, a 17-year-old. So
Yeah.
there's a lot when you look at like parent and student engagement together holistically, like the family's holistic level of engagement. Um, Amanda, I know you're not totally implementing parent promoter score in your CRM yet, but we had a really interesting conversation about where you see the value and where you'd like to go from
Sure.
here next year.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely want to do something with the parent promoter score, get it into Slate. I think there's kind of a couple of areas. We're always concerned about melt, so our deposit numbers seem to come in pretty well, but then the melt is sometimes very late in the cycle, and we do some work to get sort of melt probability and melt scores from some of our deposited students based on how they're moving through the funnel with financial aid, how they're moving through with registration, housing, all of those things. So could you take a parent promoter score that's very active, see a student that has a high melt probability, and then maybe have some wins there by reaching out to the family member to say, look, your student hasn't done X, Y, and Z. A counselor could call them or something and see how we can get that student to complete some of those tasks. Because it may just be the student is, like we said, being a student and being a 17-year-old and they're enjoying their summer and not doing these things. So where you have the disconnect between a high probability of melt and a high parent promoter score. And then one other thing, since I've talked about our orientation and family programs office has used this portal for so long, we've even talked about they're trying to build like back a family council. We had one years ago and it kind of dropped off during COVID. And so could parent promoter scores, once the student enrolls, be something that we could reach out to those with high engagement, ask them to be a member of our family council. They help with things like recruitment, open houses, outreach to current families, not just fundraising and donor kind of things, but just more an advocate for the university on the family member side. So we've talked about, could there be a way? So I think it has value on both sides through the recruitment, but also once the student gets here, staying engaged with those very active family members.
Yeah, that's super interesting. And you and I have not talked about that example before, but
Yeah.
it's interesting you bring it up because one of our other Campus ESP solutions is an advancement focused solution called Campus ESP for Parent Giving. Not what we're talking about today, but we deploy parent promoter score on the parent giving side as well. And it is used to identify parents who are donors. We can match up the parents' like capacity or wealth rating with their parent promoter score. And if they have a high level of engagement and a high level of wealth,
Yeah,
shockingly, they are more likely to make a gift or get more involved or join the parents' council and all that kind of stuff.
yeah, our former family council was really more for fundraising, but then there became the conversation, do we really want them to just be fundraisers, or can there be another piece of it that they're just advocates and a resource for first year family members coming in versus second year and third year family members?
Yep. Definitely a lot of applications even beyond enrollment. All right, so we have about 9 minutes. I just have a couple of last slides to wrap up with, and then we're going to save the rest of the time for Q&A and get Amanda going to the football game on campus, the tailgate that's getting started.
I know sports center's happening right now, so yes.
Get you out the door.
I know.
So just to wrap up, really the core result we see on the student enrollment side with Campus ESP is that parent engagement has an impact at all stages of the enrollment cycle, but students with engaged parents are more likely to apply, they're more likely to enroll. And then lastly, the parent data, the parent promoter score can be used for modeling and for communication strategy with the students who are most likely to enroll. So that's what we had covered for this case study today, this webinar review of the case study. If you'd like to learn more about Campus ESP, there are so many resources on our website. We do a weekly learning series. This is I think a weekly learning series. I'll fact check that. A couple of times a month with our customer success team. This is more geared towards current customers to learn more about the product and how to get value out of the product. We send out a monthly newsletter. We try to make our newsletter like really funny and authentic and stand out from some other marketing content out there. So if you're interested in learning more about just parent engagement trends overall, you can definitely check out and sign up for the Campus ESP newsletter. We have a lot of blogs on our website. We have other recorded webinars on our website if you'd like to just learn more. But if you're ready to talk to a member of our team, you can book a demo. We do a personalized hour-long demo where you could see what Campus CSP would look like with your branding and your school content, really tailored to your institution. So that's all we had for you today, but I'm going to stop sharing and see if there are any other questions we can answer. All right, there's nothing in the chat right now. Maybe we could do another long 30-second pause to see if any questions come in. Or as Mary Beth said earlier, the 30-second pause is not quite long as 30 seconds of burpees. All right.
We were just that good.
I see. We're just that good. No questions left to answer.
Right.
All right. Well, for those of you who are still hanging on, thank you so much for joining today, learning a little bit more about Campus ESP. And to Mary Beth and Amanda, thank you for being wonderful panelists and co-hosts, and amazing customers as well. And go enjoy the game, Amanda. Go Coastal.
I know, hopefully we win. So yes. Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
All right.
You.
Bye-bye.